Okay. For the benefit of Mark and our other foreign guests, I will try to speak English for a few minutes. Mark is the director of the Alaska and Pacific regions of the Outer Continental Shelf of the Bureau of Safety and Environment Enforcement. Probably you've all heard of BSEE. That's the everyday term we use. And this is a part of the US Department of the Interior. He is a registered professional petroleum engineer and a licensed attorney with over 40 years of natural resources experience in private industry and regulatory agencies. He is based in Anchorage in Alaska and is the senior Arctic regulatory official for BSEE in this area. Mark? Thank you.
Well, good morning, and thank PSA for holding this meeting, and thank you all for the warm welcome. As most of you are aware, things have changed a little bit in the United States since the last election, and so I'm going to try to give a quick overview of what's going on in the U.S. Arctic, with an eye towards what might change with respect to regulations and rules and safety enforcement. And the first thing to do then is to identify BSEE's mission. And BSEE's mission now is to foster safe and responsible offshore oil and gas operations to secure reliable energy production for America's future. And one of the things that we're emphasizing now is the partnership with industry to proceed in a manner that is as safe as possible, but at the same time to try to reduce some of the regulatory burden on industry. So that starts with a regulatory review. And as some of you are aware, we've received presidential and secretarial orders to reduce an undue burden on industry. And BSEE right now is completing a comprehensive review of 3 basic rules: the Production Safety Systems Rule, the Well Control Rule, and the Arctic Rule, all of which affect safety in the offshore environment. The first rule that we're talking about is the Production Safety Systems Rule, and there are proposed amendments to the current rule that address the safety and pollution prevention equipment, subsea safety devices, and safety device testing for the production of oil and gas on the Outer Continental Shelf. One of the objectives of this review and change is to reduce industry compliance burdens by at least $228 million over the next 10 years. This rule, I want to emphasize, there have been no changes yet, but this is the first rule in the pipeline, and public comment for this rule closed January 29th. The next rule that we're talking about is the Well Control Rule, and the purpose of the review of the Well Control Rule is to reduce unnecessary burdens on operators while maintaining the same level of safety and environmental protection in the OCS. It addresses current regulations that impact onshore oil and gas drilling, completions, workovers, and decommissioning activities. This rule is also in the pipeline. It opened for public comment on February 26th, and that comment closes next week on March 28th. And the last one is the Arctic Rule, probably the one of most interest here. It's also the one that we have gotten the least distance on. It's still under BSEE review, and BSEE is reviewing the provisions that can be revised to reduce unnecessary burdens on operators while maintaining the same level of safety and environmental production in the Arctic OCS. And I need to emphasize here, there have been no changes yet to either one of these 3 rules, but they're all in the pipeline to make some revisions. The other thing that's probably going to be of interest to everyone here is that there's been a change in the attitude about offshore oil and gas leasing. One of the things that wasn't a Freudian slip, please don't quote that. One of the things that has changed is that there has been both an executive order and a secretarial order to encourage energy production. Our sister agency, BOEM, which is the agency that's responsible for leasing, released a draft proposed program on January 4th, and this is the first of 3 analytical phases in that proposed program. It's called the 5-year plan, and we're holding a series of meetings in the capitals of the 23 coastal states, and talking to the public, talking to operators, talking to anybody who wants to make a comment about these proposed leasing plans, and it involves 25 planning areas and 47 specific lease sales over that 5-year period, 2019 to 2024. The comment period on these, on the draft 5-year plan closed on March 9th, 2018, and the comments are being considered right now. I don't know the final number, but there were a lot of comments. Now here's a look at the Alaska Region OCS planning area. In the 5-year plan, we are evaluating 12 out of the 13 planning areas. You notice the North Aleutian Basin right here is not included. 12 out of the 13 are, but the North Aleutian Basin is not. The reason for that is Bristol Bay. It's a very important salmon fishing region, and the decision has already been made that won't be evaluated for a lease sale. But everything else in Alaska is up for evaluation. Of course, the Arctic region, which is the Chukchi Sea Regional Planning Area, the Beaufort Sea Regional Planning Area, and a small part of this Hope Basin are up for evaluation. And we're looking at holding some lease sales up there in the relatively near future. So let's talk about what is actually going on in the U.S. Arctic right now. Basically, we have 4 projects, and they are the ENI project here, the North Star project here, the Liberty project, and the ASRC project. Let's start with where we have current production. And we do have current production in the North Star Development Project. It is a gravel island in state waters, but the wells are drilled out from state waters into the federal reservoir, and the production is federal for a part of the wells on that gravel island. It has been producing for a while. It is currently producing. It's an older project, and it's operated by Hillcorp. Hillcorp bought this project from BP a couple of years ago. And this talks a little bit about the project. Again, it's an offshore gravel island. There are 6 federal producing wells operated by Hillcorp, privately held, and it was acquired from BP in 2012. And it's interesting to note that 100% of this project was acquired in 2012. So let's talk about some of the proposals. Well, the first one we'll talk about is the Liberty Unit. The Liberty Unit is a project that's been around for a while, since the 1990s. It is, again, a gravel island, but this time the gravel island, which is to be built, is in federal waters, drilling into federal reservoirs. So this is going to be the first all-federal project we have. Again, it's operated by Hillcorp, but Hillcorp is not the only owner. They own 50% of it. 40% is owned by another company, and then 10% is owned by a native corporation in Alaska. The other company was BP. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to gloss over that. So when BP sold that project to Hillcorp, they only sold 50% of it. And in fact, BP sold another 10% to that Arctic Regional Slope Corporation, which is a native corporation headquartered in Alaska. Here's a look at what the proposed gravel island will look like. 5 to 8 producing wells. We estimate 50 to 70,000 barrels per day. And optimistically, first oil could be in 2020. That may have slipped by a year. Again, the operator is Hillcorp. Now, here's the most interesting project to me. On Christmas of last year, ENI spudded their first well in this project. Again, it's from a gravel island called Spy Island in state waters, but they're drilling out into federal waters, into this 13-unit federal block. The interesting part about this is that it's going to have an extremely long horizontal throw. They're looking at least 5 miles. They asked me not to tell you exactly how much, but it's a very long throw for a horizontal well offshore. Like I said, they spudded it Christmas, and they're currently drilling on it. And if I wasn't here, I would know exactly where they were, but I can't tell you right now. Here's a little bit of the information about it. Like I said, it was spudded almost on Christmas morning. Planned to directionally drill. The operator is ENI, and here's one of the interesting parts to me. While Shell has announced that they have left the U.S. Arctic, they own 50% of this project, and in fact have acquired another 10% since the project started. And the last one, and probably the longest term project, is owned entirely by the Arctic Slope Regional Corporation. What they've done is buy some of the leases that Shell had basically vacated in 2015, and they're trying to put together a drilling unit there. We've got some issues with them. We're dealing with those issues. In fact, this afternoon at 5 o'clock, I've got a conference call to talk about some of those issues. But the issues revolve around extending the leases to allow them to have the opportunity to develop this. Like I said, this is a completely native-owned corporation, and as of right now, they haven't told us that they have a partner. I don't know what the deal will look like, but it's a very exciting prospect. Shell drilled on it in 2012. It is a pretty significant potential because of it's located very close to the end of the pipeline, the Trans-Alaska Pipeline. The other interesting thing about it is that this is the only project we have that will be drilled from a floater. This will have to be drilled from an anchored drill ship. The water depth is between 120 and 140 feet, so it may have some technical challenges to the drilling, but we're looking forward to maybe getting this project off the ground. Again, I want to emphasize that the AEX, which is the operator, is the subsidiary of the Arctic Slope Regional Corporation, which is a completely Alaska Native-owned corporation, and is the largest, and in fact is the largest corporation in Alaska. And are there any questions?
Thank you very much, Mark, for an informative presentation. It'll be very interesting to follow how things develop across in Alaska now in the near future. I have one question for you before we let others ask. What do you believe the future of the Arctic rule may be?
Okay. Well, like I said, there have been no changes yet. The general consensus among our management is that Shell, most of the Arctic rule was proposed by Shell. Much of the Arctic rule was proposed by Shell. And the consensus is that while Shell did a magnificent job of doing that it may have been a little bit too much. It may have economically passed a threshold. And so that some of the things that they did may not be required to be safe enough. Like I said, one of the objectives is to not reduce the safety and environmental security on the project, but what they want to do, what our management wants to do, is to find ways to reduce the burden to make this economically viable. Our new objective is to partner with industry to get this done in a safe and environmentally sound manner.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any questions? We have time for a few questions from the audience. Okay. Hugo, could you please just give your name, your affiliation, and...
Yeah, my name is Hugo Halvorsen. I work for an outfit called Working Together for Safety, where all the operators join forces and try to come up with best practices. Could you say something about the main challenges that's been in terms of HSE issues on that area that you're talking about?
Well, I think, as usual, and everybody here who works in the Arctic, there are differences in HSE issues in the Arctic. Temperature, reliability of equipment, things like that are different in the Arctic. Testing equipment probably needs to be on different schedules because there are different issues. For instance, testing equipment with seals in it. In the Arctic, that is pretty strenuous on the equipment, whereas someplace else it would not be as strenuous. So the first big issue is the environment that we have to work in. Second is worker fatigue and making sure that the workers are focused on what we're doing. And I think, as Ann said in her presentation, we need to make sure, or she alluded to, I'm not going to put words in your mouth, I apologize. We need to make sure that people keep paying attention to the safety and that they don't lose sight of it, even though it's doggone cold out there, even though that they've rotated up and back and will be rotating. So it's keeping focus in the Arctic is another big issue too.
We have time for a few more questions. Okay, Mark will be available in the breaks and also you will get this, so you'll be able to contact him if you need to afterwards.
Thank you.
Right? Carolina, don't run away. Don't run away.
Give you this.